Vikir notices who the barbarian was. He recalls seeing her at the slave auction as the one that he had let go. Vikir asks her if she was repaying his kindness with revenge, but she tells him that she was a slave, and needed to take revenge for her capture, and that it has nothing to do with him, just the Morg family. She leaps onto her pet wolf. As she turns to leave with her group, she tells Vikir that she had repaid what she got, and that they had taken the next leader of the Morg family, Camus, and that if he wanted her back, he needed to follow them. Vikir thinks about revealing his power here, but Uncle Adolf had arrived. He was shouting after Camus while bringing the reinforcement. Vikir sees him and thinks that he had run all the way here after hearing about the ambush. Just as Adolf prepares a blue spell in his hand, he calls the barbarians bastards. He unleashes the spell into the group, sending shockwaves that appear to chase after the barbarians, as he shouts at them to return back Camus to him, but the barbarians were unaffected by the shockwaves from the ground. As they easily rode their wolves, dodging the attack and making a swift exit, they leaped through the rubble that the spell had caused that slowly disappeared from the base. Vikir and Adolf along with the reinforcements could only curse and stare at the barbarians as they easily left them behind. Vikir thinks about the Balak's ambush. Seeing that they had finished the ambush just 3 minutes after the warning bell had been rung, things became worse because it overlapped with Camus' carelessness and lack of practical experience. Vikir notices that a subordinate was telling Adolf that they believed that the Balaks had run off to the restricted area of the Le Rouge et Le Noir mountain. Adolf couldn't believe that the Balaks had gone into the restricted area of the mountain with Camus. Adolf thinks about the restricted area, knowing that it was undiscovered and a dangerous place. Heading there at night was going to be too dangerous, he thinks about Camus and wondered if there was nothing he could do now, but Vikir joins into their talk, telling them that they could still pursue the Balaks, catching Adolf's and his men attention. He tells them that he had been in the dense forest before in his childhood, but deep down in his thoughts, Vikir knew about the forest because of his past regression, and that he had recon and subjugation experience as he went through most of the dense forest. Adolf grabs Vikir's shoulder because of what he just said, asking Vikir if he was actually serious. The man behind Adolf informs him that going into the Le Rouge mountain itself was a suicide mission, but Adolf tells him that he will only bring those that want to go, and wouldn't make an issue out of it later. As Vikir nervously looks at Adolf's hand on his shoulder, Adolf thought to himself that he already knew that Vikir was extraordinary but had no other choice than to rely on him. The moonlight pierces the skies as Adolf tells Vikir that he will leave it to him to save his niece Camus. A metal fence is seen with a skull sign. It was the booty of the dense forest on the Le Rouge mountain residing on the Baskerville territory. Inside the dense forest, there were many creatures such as the bone-sucking mosquitoes, poisonous thorny vines, silent spiders and other dangerous creatures. A normal human being would never last for more than an hour in there, which was why it was called the life-engulfing forest. Something bounces off a tree branch. Adolf and his men are seen following a red streak of light bouncing side to side. Adolf asks Staffordshire if all the kids from the Baskerville clan were like Vikir, but he tells him of course not as the triplets follow them from behind. Yellow hornets with red glowing eyes appears. Just like the ones in Pokemon, Vikir grabs onto his sword, preparing himself just as Staffordshire tells Adolf that Vikir was special. Vikir easily slices the yellow hornets into pieces. The triplets stare at him in amazement. All of them were thinking about how cool Vikir was. Vikir peeks out from his cover, sending a signal to everyone else, catching Adolf and Staffordshire's attention. A bright orange glow is seen in the distance as Vikir tells them that he doesn't think that the barbarians have gotten far. He tells them of a rumor he heard, that the Balak hunter would scatter dry leaves to hear the sound of their chasers. He warns them that they needed to be more careful from here onwards. Adolf approaches Vikir and casts a spell called Silence. He explains to him that this magic would prevent him from making noise as he walks. Adolf tells Vikir to let him take over from here and that he won't forget this, calling him nephew-in-law. Vikir grows nervous at the thought of this nephew-in-law. A campfire is lit, showing that the barbarians were all gathered around the fire with their wolves on standby. Camus was tied to a string, shouting at them, calling them bitches, and that once she was free, she will burn them all to death. She continues to yell at them, telling them that she'll show them the horror of her special fireball and that they should prepare themselves. But they ignored her. Two females were talking about how they liked the guy they saw before and that they failed in husband hunting. Camus began to breath heavily from all the shouting as sweat drips down her face. She thinks about how they weren't even listening to her, and that they've been talking about husband and wife hunting since earlier. She wonders if that was why they kept ambushing them, but a foot appears near her. A male barbarian appears stroking his chin, saying that since they captured Camus, all the males within the tribe would want her. Camus yells at him, calling him a perverted bastard, asking what he was planning to do to her and that they should kill her instead. But the man cleaned his ears, saying he doesn't understand what she was saying. He grabs her face instead, knowing that she was talking back because of the look in her eyes. He licks an arrow as he stares at Camus' face, telling her that an arrogant slave should be disciplined, but Ayan interrupts them. She calls him a Hun and tells him to get away from her slave. A Hun talks back to Ayan, saying that he was the one who captured Camus. But Ayan tells him that it was bullshit and to keep his voice down. But a Hun continues to argue, saying he was the one that shot the paralyzing arrow and set up the trap. But Ayan tells him that she made it possible because she stopped Vikir, who was good with the sword, or else he would be dead. Camus stares at them arguing and wonders if an internal argument was breaking out. She looks at Ayan and assumes she was the commander. She thinks deeply about how Ayan had the skill to go against Vikir, who was a low-ranking graduator, and that if she wanted to escape, Camus needed to do something about Ayan first. A Hun continues to shout at Ayan, telling her that he won't let her stubbornness slide just because she was the commander. But Ayan's hand began to glow blue. She lets out an intense glare at a Hun, revealing a horrifying blue aura, as she tells him that if he was angry, he could come at her any time, and she would turn him into a bloody mess. Seeing Ayan this way sent an overwhelming sense of fear into a Hun. He then decides to give up and back off as Ayan continued to stare at him intensely. Camus sees a Hun leaving angrily and thought that Ayan had won. Ayan praises Camus' eyes and physique as she came from a good bloodline, but she kicks into Camus' shoulder hard, telling Camus that she was captured by the Morgue clan bastards and sold into slavery. As Camus lets out a painful grunt, Ayan recalls her meeting with Vikir, and that she was lucky to receive some kindness that allowed for her to escape from the fate of a slave. But her eyes were filled with anger as she tells Camus that she won't be as lucky, and that she'll take her time to tame Camus so much that she would feel it in her bones and soul, making licking the spaces between her toes a daily routine for Camus. But an explosion erupts all of a sudden behind Ayan. Ayan turns around and both her and Camus were shocked to see the explosion. The barbarians shouted out that it was an ambush, as some of them were set on fire, screaming in pain. Footsteps are seen walking through the fire. Adolf appears among the flames, calling out to barbarians that he had come to repay them for what they did. Camus was happy to recognize that voice. She sees that it was her uncle, with fire in his hand. Adolf shouts to them to return his niece back to him this instant. The barbarians could only stare as everything was set ablaze in front of them. They see that the Morgue and Baskerville clan members were easily killing each of the barbarians. Vikir was sitting on a branch of a tree, witnessing how everything was unfolding. He looks at the scene before him, thinking that something was strange. He wondered why the Balax who ambushed them before so perfectly was now panicking this easily from an attack. The barbarians turned to run away from the attack on their wolves, calling the Morgue and Baskerville clans crazy bastards for causing such an uproar inside the forest in the middle of the night. But Adolf shouts at his members, telling them to not let a single barbarian run away alive. Just as two Morgue members chased after the barbarians, Camus laughs at the barbarians and tells them they were getting what they deserved, but a sound rustles behind her, causing her to sit upright. Her face grew nervous as she slowly turns around to see what it was. It was Vikir. He signals to her to be quiet as she yells out his name. He cuts the ropes that were tying Camus to the tree with ease. Camus is happy to see him as he lifts her up, asking if he came to save her. Vikir replies back to her if she doesn't understand what hand gesture was used for keeping quiet, but their chat was cut off as Ayan appears before them, telling Vikir that she knew that the boy who uses knives well would come. She tells him that his strong physique that made it possible to cover a long distance within a short period of time, and his level-headedness that made it possible for him to get through the darkness of the forest, adding on his passionate and pure love that made him put his life on the line for his girl. All these conditions were perfect. As Ayan tells Vikir that she won't ask about his past and that he had passed, Vikir looks at her and wondered what he had passed. But Camus and Ayan send lightning stares at one another as they both know what each of them wanted. Vikir is a ladies' man. Vikir pulls Camus closer to him, causing her to blush slightly, as he thinks about not being able to hide his powers in this situation, and that he couldn't recall anything about Ayan from his past life. Ayan seemed pissed that Camus was close to Vikir, as he wonders if she was the one that gave the nose bridge scar to Hugo's face, and if she was the Black Archer Night Fox, but he changes his thought as he realizes that she was too young and unskilled to be the Night Fox, but was probably someone who had the same bloodline. But as they were talking, a blow dart is seen pointing at them. Vikir sees the attack going to Camus and easily blocks it with his hand. Hun was shocked to see this and wondered how Vikir knew as he was hiding in the bushes. Vikir decides to pick up Camus, causing her to scream a bit as he realized that things had become bothersome. He tells Camus to bear it with him for a little, and that he will return her to his uncle. Camus agrees shyly, thinking that he was still out of it as he was using formal language, which might be because of the poison. Vikir and Camus quickly leap away, leaving Ayan to stand alone in silence. She scratches her head, saying that she wanted Vikir to return with her obediently. As Vikir and Camus escape, he asks her if she was severely poisoned. Camus replies shly while blushing that she thinks so. All of a sudden 2 barbarians appear and shoot arrows at them. Vikir manages to block their attacks with his sword as Camus shrieks from fear. Ayan then prepares her arrow, lightly releasing a blue aura that covered the arrow. She stretches the bowstring and prepares her shot, with her arrow glowing blue intensely, her gaze filled with focus as she prepares to get rid of Camus. She lets go of the arrow, which unleashes a powerful blue streak of light. The arrow soon reaches the back of Vikir as he carries Camus. He turns his head in a swift motion and sees the powerful arrow reaching them. Camus turns as well due to Vikir and sees the arrow just inches away from her eye. Huge pillars of ice suddenly erupt throughout the forest following the attack of the arrow. Sweat drips down Camus' face as she spots the arrow standing still just inches from her face. Adolf appears and had used ice magic to freeze the arrow from attack Vikir and Camus. He shouts at Camus asking if she was alright. Camus was glad to see her uncle arrived. Adolf casts Cure Poison to heal Camus. He holds Camus dearly and mentioned that the poison was really severe and numbing, which was difficult for him to remove everything, and tells her that they needed to visit the divine Quo Vadis when they return. But Camus pushes his hand away, asking him to let her go for a moment. Instead she runs towards Vikir and hugs him with all her might, telling him that he had saved her again. Seeing the shocked Adolf, tears filled his eyes and he tries to tell her that he too also tried his best, but Camus was not happy with him. She yells at him, wondering why he had only come now and that she was going to tell her mother everything. Just as Camus was yelling at Adolf, a rope appears around Vikir's face. The rope tightly wraps itself around Vikir's neck as Ayan appears behind him, holding the rope tightly and surprising Vikir. She tries her best to pull Vikir but couldn't. She wondered why he was so strong and why he wasn't moving backwards. She tells Vikir to be obedient and to let himself be captured as she was running out of time. Vikir easily snaps the rope into pieces, thinking why was there no time. Camus yells at her, saying it was you again. Vikir thought deeply about the reason why the Balak were in a hurry. Soon enough a demonic being gaze was felt. An ominous deadly aura was felt throughout the forest. Ayan trembles in fear as she gazes at the sky, saying shit, did it finally noticed. Even Vikir's weapon Beelzebub was activating on its own and causes a buzz. Vikir looks at it, wondering why the Beelzebub in his veins were giving him an intense warning. He knew that it meant that something was coming. Ayan tells him that she was coming as sweat drips down her face. Fear overtook her as she spoke its name, Madame Eight Legs. As she looked up, a sudden pillar appears as though it pierced through the forest and was aiming for the skies. Everyone looked at it. The barbarians and even its wolves were terrified at its appearance, saying that the madam was here. Vikir and Camus looked up and wondered why a pillar had appeared. The pillar was releasing a scary-looking purple aura, and soon split into various legs. Hell no, if I was there I would be running away instantly. Like by Felicia, the legs attack various places throughout the forest. As Adolf covers Camus and Vikir, he questions why there was such a monsters hiding in the forest. Vikir recalls what the monster was and didn't expect to see it in a place like this. If Vikir's memory was right, it was Madame Eight Legs who had an S rank rating. Madame Eight Legs lets out a horrifying shriek of madness that was heard throughout the forest as the three of them stare in horror. As Camus tries to shout out what that was, Vikir quickly covers her mouth, telling her that she can't make loud noises. He explains to her that even though Madame Eight Leg has poor sight, it has sensitive touch and hearing. Vikir recalls an old native prior to his regression, about the incidents seen and heard about at the Le Rouge et Le Noir mountain. The legend the elder told seemed like a horror story. It was a horror story about the madam with 8 legs which inhabited in the depths of the Forest, according to the Empire's Monster Dictionary, which was finalized after 7 revisions, there were written records of Madame Eight Legs, that its risk ranking was S, and was a monster capable of destroying a nation within a single day, making it a disaster rank. Madame Eight Legs lets out a horrible shriek, causing green slime to spread all around from its mouth, as though it was part of Nickelodeon's slime show. The green slime melts the branches of the tree. Vikir dodges the green slime with ease while Adolf protects Camus from the slime using a spell shield, but Hans lets out a scream like a little girl. He shouts out as Madame's poison had landed on his hair. No more man buns for him. The hair covered with poison was quickly cut off. Ian had cut it off, whispering to him that he was an idiot for screaming in front of the madam. Just as Hun kneels down on the ground, Ian couldn't believe what happened and looked up. She sees that Madame Eight Legs was looking right at her. She tells Hun that she would have killed him, but he was lucky that he was the grandchild of the shaman. She whispers to the others to quickly retreat. On the other side, Vikir and others were making a run for it too, as Adolf whispers to them that they needed to get away. But Madame Eight Legs had spotted both groups and slowly senses their movements with her. I don't know what this is, man. Is this a tongue? Comment below what you think this part is. Madame Eight Legs had spotted the 2 groups who were retreating differently. The Ballacks were running away in small groups just like the blue dots, whereas the Morgs and Baskerville members were running away in a large group just like the red dots. There was a slight difference in how the 2 groups retreated, but it made the madam decide who to chase after. It decided to chase Vikir and the others. Adolf asked why it was coming their way. A member of the Morg clan tells Adolf to leave it to him as he knew that a bug's weakness was a fire attack. He conjures a huge fireball and sends it flying towards the madam. It lands and causes a huge explosion in its face. The members saw the explosion and believed that the fireball attack had worked. The man asked Adolf if he had saw that, but was interrupted when one of Madame's legs pierced through the man beside him into the air. The man could only stare as blood flew all over from its attack. Blood was spilled on his face as tears began to form. He looks at the madam and realized that the fireball attack had nothing. Adolf was panicking as he was running away, wondering what the hell was that. But Vikir was deep in thought. He decided that this was it. As the others continued to run away, Vikir had turned around, surprising them. Staffordshire sees this and asks what Vikir was doing. Vikir tells him that at the rate they were going, they were all going to be killed, so one of them is needed to tie down the monster's legs. Staffordshire then offers to do it, but Vikir cuts him off, telling him that his skills were not enough to tie down the monster's leg. Everyone could only stare at Vikir in silence as he explained to them that they couldn't afford to bring the monster back into the territory with them, and that in the current situation, the best person has to tie its leg down, which was Vikir. As he holds his sword closely, he tells Adolf that there was no time and a decision was left at him, but Camus was shocked to see what Vikir was doing. Adolf hesitated at the idea of leaving behind Vikir alone, but Vikir tells him to hurry and run away. Adolf then decides to leave Vikir, telling the others to not let his nephew-in-law's sacrifice be in vain. Tears form in Camus' eyes as she calls out to Vikir while Adolf pulls her away from him. Camus' voice could be heard telling Vikir to return, but Adolf tells her not to move as Vikir holds his sword tightly, but he lets out a deep breath and lets go of his sword. He looks ahead and thinks that he has no intention in the destruction of the Baskerville territory, and that the Allied forces could not stop the madam who was still growing. However, this was a good opportunity for Vikir, as he plans to fake his death in order to get away from Hugo. To buy enough time for him to learn the 10th technique in his head, he decides to return to the clan, only when he was skilled enough to not be pushed around by Hugo, or when he had perfect control over his skill. Being able to hide and control it was when he will return. Vikir unleashes the full power of Beelzebub in his arm, revealing its demonic energy blade. Knowing that if he doesn't go all out, he would die, Madame Eight Legs stares at Vikir as Vikir stares back at it, preparing himself for his hardest fight yet. The Baskervilles and Beelzebub's demonic energy surrounds Vikir's body as he slowly unleashes all his skills. The large amount of mana he received from the river Styx as blessing, the aura that was more worldly and used for high-ranking Baskerville swordsmanship techniques, and finally, the demonic sword Beelzebub. Vikir's eyes were filled with intense focus as he tells the monster that he was going to use everything he has to attack it. Vikir leaps forward with crazy speed in a zigzag motion, and leaps through all the trees in the forest into the night sky. The red aura follows him as he makes his way into the clouds. His demonic sword glowed red as he sees Madame Eight Legs right in front of him. Madame Eight Legs lets out a shriek as it spots Vikir in the air. Vikir gives it a bombastic side-eye while raising his sword up in the air, unleashing an immensely powerful attack that turned the pages black and white and the drawer colorblind, revealing a bright red attack from him that strikes Madame Eight Leg head-on. It was the Baskerville's fifth technique. Fury rose in Vikir's face as he attacks with all his soul and strength. Madame Eight Legs soon began to tremble from the power of Vikir's strike, causing it to slam into Mother Earth as Vikir's attack was powerful enough to force it to the ground. The attack caused a bright red glow to appear in the forest, which began to shine like a diamond in the sky. Soon a huge crimson-red glow appears in the forest and reaches for the sky. Just as Adolphe and the others made it out of the forest, Camus sees the intense glow unveiling right before her eyes. Tears fall from her face as she witnesses what happens next. The red glow slowly begins to die down as Camus screams out, "Vikir!" Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more Manhwa recaps and